We're doing it. We're going live. I've got a little bit different setup this week. I am in a new spot. I'm doing new things. Got a whole new backdrop. And so here I am. I'm going to do an audio test real quick. We're doing it. We're going live. See what our delay is. I've got a little bit different setup. We're doing it. We're going live. I've got a little bit different setup this week. Things. I am in a new spot. I'm doing new things. Got a whole new backdrop. Here I am. I'm going to do an audio test real quick. Double audio. Everything is great. Welcome, friends, enemies, and everyone in between, as always, to the Japanime weekly live stream, where I recap everything that happened in the week that is of importance to you, answer your questions, and maybe let you in on whatever other stuff may be going on with us or the industry that you may find out is important. That's kind of my jam here. I am, once again, as always, Jackson Wood. Always here, always around, often in the backgrounds, being that guy who, if you deal with us in any capacity on the internet, there's a high likelihood it's me or it's Heather. So, with that, I'm going to try my best as always to go back, put notes in, get those tags in later in case you're watching us for the first time. But when I don't have questions, I'm going to try to be succinct and move on to and make sure things are sort of categorized in the proper way. So, not to talk too quickly, not to make this too laborious. It's just me. Try to keep it to about 10, 15 minutes at most, usually 5 to 10. Answer any of those questions. So, let's get into the first bit. Number one, probably most important to a lot of folks, is our international fulfillment. We, towards the turn of the new year, end of last year, ended up doing an initiative internally to work with fulfillment centers in both the EU and Australia. So we have a fulfillment center in Australia, we have a fulfillment center in Germany. We don't quite know how that's going to pan out for the UK yet with Brexit, but for other folks who are in Europe, it is a flat rate. This is the same for Australia. Hi, Dark Angel Callie. I've got a little bit of a delay, so like my responses to you may be a little bit delayed as I'm talking about things. But in talking about international stuff, you don't have that same threshold that you would through the US store. So keep that in mind. Sometimes it may just be better to get a game, especially if you're looking at a promo like Krampus from yesterday or earlier. It may just, because it's a flat rate for how they handle things, the fulfillment center, it may be easier for you to get something and then go from there. But that is kind of the big thing there. That then lends into, we are bringing somebody on board internally for Europe. We have a European representative. They are in Europe specifically, and they're going to be focusing on those European countries, starting with France, because we know France is, at least as far as the EU is concerned, is underutilized and oftentimes doesn't get the same kind of look that other places do. So we're really making the EU a focus as we continue to grow and move forward. But we just kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit. We don't have a formal press release for it just yet. It's coming. Part of that's on me, but it'll be coming. We'll get to introduce that wonderful, wonderful, lovely person soon. It's been such a pleasure just getting them onboarded and getting rolling. So that's Europe. In particular, we don't have somebody specific for Australia and surrounding region yet. That doesn't mean we won't. That's just not where we are currently. So international fulfillment, those centers are there. Flat rates are probably a little bit better. We have somebody focusing on Europe, and we're going to go from there and see how things go. But that does sort of lend into tying things together, that Europe and Krampus, Australian Krampus, international fulfillment and Krampus, we got a lot of really great response to how the Krampus promo did overall. And that's opened new doors for conversations. I can't, again, say what that's going to mean because we're still in those early stages of it. But that could mean new ways you see promos. That could mean new standard ways you see promos. It may mean a different offering of promos in the future. All sorts of options have opened up with it. But your response as a whole, as always, has been overwhelmingly positive, and we really appreciate it. So to all our fans out there in that regard, especially if you got yourself a Krampus or you're looking to get a Krampus, thank you. That's sort of the big one there. Moving into other updates for things that people tend to get excited about or care about. Uh, Japanime Tactics, it's still moving along. We should, as I kind of said last week, and I say every week, we're in that back and forth approvals process. So it's us saying, hey, we have this thing. Here's where we're at with it. Here's what we think. And so then we have to get the licensor, in this case, Side Games, to say yes, that's cool, 100%. Go ahead and roll with that. So that's kind of the deal there. But it's always sort of where we're at any point in the development process. If we could be, this deep in, we could be just concepting. But that's where Japanime Tactics are. I'm going to kind of use that to roll into the next thing, which Dark Angel Callie so graciously talked about. Let's talk about all of Heather's updates. I know we haven't necessarily been the best about Kickstarter updates, and that kind of ties into this. And hopefully we may get a better announcement together for it or not. I don't know what our plan is right now, especially with it being Friday. But because of all of the not only manufacturing delays but shipping delays that various games have seen, not just from us but other companies, it's been really hard. And we haven't given you the level of update that we know a lot of you want. I know we had promised a certain thing, and I'm not actually involved with that part of it, and I probably should be more. So that's on my list of things to talk about internally. But we said we'd give you monthly updates or every 2 weeks. And in reality, we're kind of at that stage where it's just things are made for a lot of stuff. It's just like, okay, when is it going to like leave the factory to the shipping containers, or when is it going to leave port to go elsewhere? So that's a lot of where it's been, and I know that various stages of that could have been communicated better. So I know I at least personally feel bad that we haven't communicated better on those fronts, but hopefully we will. I say hopefully about a lot of things, but I really do care about communication with you all and making sure you know. So in that regard, tying it into what Dark Angel Callie said, which was a shorthand to Callie for now. That's okay. Um, we're really excited for Rise of the Old Ones, like Kamigami as a whole. That opens so many new doors. In general, moving to uh, pantheons and deities that exist outside of contemporary religion and mythology, things outside of our communal human composition, right? Like Christianity and Hinduism, or the various different forms of mantra and yoga practice in India, and talking about Buddhism and Celtic deities as well. So like the Irish pantheon, the Tuatha De Danann, and talking about like Chinese and Japanese deities. Those are all things that we have grounded here in our society. Us as peoples have done that. But Lovecraft and so forth was created. That's its own work of creation, not necessarily observed by a group, but in and of itself. And so that opens new doors of being able to do more stuff with these fun things. So we're really excited about that. And we don't want to shy away from other real world examples of things. So we definitely have things coming in regards to more busty waifu games, because we know that's something that a lot of you love. But we're also, as I kind of talked about before, trying to branch out into whole new areas as well. We have these more artistic Japanese games that really exemplify the artistry and passion of the designers. And we have things like Tokyo Sidekick, going back to Kickstarter stuff, that is so wholly different from anything else you find in Japan, but is a very Japanese product, like a very Japanese game. So just trying to do a bunch of different things there, trying to cover the board. And so that's kind of the deal there. Wrapping that up, kind of moving into the final stages for today. As always, I am here until you all run out of questions or until things start to wind down or otherwise. But my whole sort of let me recap the week and talk at you is over, and we're moving into the more relaxed conversational component. And I know there's a bit of a delay between me saying this and the stream, so I'm going to hang out for a bit. I'm going to kind of vamp, and if it seems like I jump from a topic randomly into answering questions, that's why. So if you have questions right now, please ask me them. I always collect questions throughout the week just to see. These weekly recaps are, again, meant to be short and sweet to some extent, but also a hangout session for you all as fans to get a chance to talk with me live, opposed to maybe on Discord, which is the second best way to get a hold of me. If you go on Discord and you're like, "Hey Jackson, I need your help with something, or can you answer a question?" The answer is maybe. Uh, I say maybe in that I'm always going to try to answer your question, but I may not be able to, and I will be transparent about that if I can't. And if I can't answer your question, I'll tell you why. So oftentimes it's like, oh, I gotta go to the designer because the designer is in Japan, and I don't actually know what their intent was. Maybe something got lost in translation, or maybe just maybe their intent was correct. Like you nailed their intent, but the way it got translated, or the way that the intent came across wasn't checked initially, and so it did get mistranslated when proofs were happening. Uh, you know, there's that. That's a good question, Callie. I don't know the release date for Alternate Souls. It has nothing to do with us. We were on board with that originally, so we had been involved uh, for the first Kickstarter for it, and there was a lot working on in the backgrounds, and that just, it ended up not being a project for us in the long run. Not that we don't love the people involved, we do deeply, but it just didn't end up being a project for us specifically, and so that's just kind of how that shook out. As for more player versus player games of that capacity, we don't have any lined up like that. Again, there's some other stuff that's going to be coming, and I think a lot of people will be pleasantly surprised, especially based on particular fandoms and IPs and things like that are involved with those projects. But right now, I don't have the latitude to talk more in depth about what that subject matter might be, what those games might look like. It's mostly me just being able to say, like, we know we haven't made games with that kind of art for a while, and it isn't necessarily always our focus. We try to hit a bunch of different points. Um, so that's kind of how it goes. Of course, roll. Heather jumped to it as I was saying earlier. At least for myself, I'm remiss that we're not, being more on top of those updates. It's really just been a matter of nothing's changed a lot of the time. Like things have been made. Uh, Most of what we are waiting on, there are some outliers. So don't take this to be whole across all of the Kickstarters that are waiting to be fulfilled. Uh, some got delayed. As you may know, like we were hoping to also release Ramen Ramen and The Last Brave. And because of some manufacturing setbacks and changes, that got pushed back. And so we have a whole slew of things coming out quarter 1, quarter 2 of this year that we had hoped to get out by the end of last year. But that's just how timing works. And of course, I don't want to lean on the pandemic because that's not my jam, right? Like, there's a problem. How do you overcome the problem? How do you move forward? And we're doing the best we can there, i.e., through these different fulfillment options and all these things are going on. Um, you know, it's kind of that stuff. And that's what's made it hard. But, things are changing. We're growing as a team. I think some practices that the team as a whole did before uh, didn't necessarily, they haven't changed with the times. So, Callie, that's great to know in regards to that type of content. Again, we are diversifying, so I don't know how many of those are on the docket for this next year, but I know there's at least one, maybe two. It just depends on production time and otherwise. As to your question, Roll, about more dominant games, nothing beyond what I said before is we will talk about those kinds of things when more is able to be talked about them. At least in terms of where we're at now, I don't know. At least in regards to that, there is no contract on the table for future dominant games that I know of. Not to say that those conversations aren't happening, but no ink has dried. And because nothing is 100%, I don't want to be the guy that you all come back to later and be like, Jackson fucking promised us that this was going to exist, and now it doesn't. So that's not my jam either. Not really what I am looking to do. So that's kind of the big deal there. Any other questions that I can answer for you all before I start winding down? Uh, as usual, this is sort of my like, I'll answer the questions I can and like hang out for a bit. And then if there's no other questions, hopefully that answers sort of the primary ones that you may all have. I went through and made timestamps for everything so that I can go back in afterwards and uh, go from that. Uh, in what regards, role for Tanto Kure playtesters? I know we are in a stage that I can't talk too much about. I know we're going to be looking for playtesters. I know that's coming. Um, the more general playtester, it got pushed back further than I had hoped. That should have been more recent. Um, but that's kind of how things are. If you are part of Team Japanime, I just put out a call just because some of those members of Team Japanime have uh, either an NDA on them or are willing to sign an NDA, things like that. Were given the stage of that particular project, specifically the Tanto Digital project. Um, I can't talk about right now due to where it's at and the fact that it's associated with uh, other stakeholders, i.e., like ArcLight and whatnot. Very strict processes that I have to adhere to that I can't talk about certain things in that regard. Not that what they have on me makes it so that I can't, but because of what me talking about that could do, it just kind of overlaps. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it helps a little bit. We're going to be bringing in more playtesters over time. It's just specifically from Team Japanime for um, TCGs. I'll answer this question last, and then I'll be rolling out of here for Kelly. But any chance bring a new Japanese TCG aside from alternate souls? We aren't typically in the business of alternate, like anything that is collectible right now. Trading card games, it's a really touchy subject for a lot of people, and alternate souls was sort of our step into it. And we talked about some other things that may look like that capacity or like in that vein of things. But for the most part, uh, trading card games have never really done well with our primary audience. And if there's not a market there for it, which is part of what, at least to us, alternate souls didn't hit our thresholds for what we needed to make it a project that would be worth it to not only us as a publisher, but to you as consumers. Especially when it comes to trading card games, we want to look at the longevity of the product. We don't want to just do a turn and burn. So we don't want to make a game, put out an expansion or two, crank you for tons of money, and then that game dies. Like that's not our jam. I don't know. I know I say it like that's not my jam a lot, but more specifically, the last thing we want to do is sucker somebody into a project, especially the consumer, and then just dump them. Nobody wants that. And that's a thing that we saw, at least when we were looking at TCGs in the first place, that like could be problematic. Tons of trading card games have come out over the years, similar like MMOs for video games, things like that, and sometimes they just die. And so we want to make sure that it's a surefire. Like if we're gonna dive into that realm, which is why we were looking at Alternate Souls to Eiji, because we love Eiji. We love the projects that he's worked on in general. So we wanted to make sure it was a good fit, and we thought that it would be there. Like Transformers TCG, I think the original Digimon's trading card game way back in the day, tons of trading card games all the time. So it's a really rough market, and sorry, I'm like moving around things as I fiddle with that. it's a really tough market, and the people who are in it right now that have made it their focus, like I respect that a ton. It's a really difficult place to be, especially if you're starting from scratch. So yeah, TCGs are a really interesting place, but that's kind of outside of where we want to be on the whole. Uh, and TCGs in Japan work very differently than they do in the US or other places. Like it just kind of shifts things. But with that said, as I said, I'm kind of winding down. I love you all as usual. If by the time I wrap this up, I don't see your comment or your question, hit me up on Discord. Ask your questions there. It's going to be the best place to reach me. And then I'll be going back in over the weekend and trying to put those timeline tags for everybody who's catching us for the first time so you can jump around or come back to this and be like, it's right there. So, as always, thank you, our fans. I can't do what I do without you, and I appreciate the few of you that come and visit me every week and hang out and ask questions and listen to me ramble. That's the whole point of this sort of short snippet. But feel free to reach out. As I said, I'm on Discord, social media. Hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Love you all. I can't do it without you. So hopefully, I'll see you uh, in the future. But Callie, that's right. TCGs are risky. Kamigami is amazing. I love that game. I love most of our deck builders. I say most because like I'm not a deck builder guy, and I was like, oh, I'm leaving. I'm not leaving. Uh, they're not my champ, but Kamigami's great. I love Tanto too for what it does differently. So many great deck builders. So I'll leave you with that. So many great deck builders. Ba 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 ba. Obviously me. Thank you all. Hopefully we get even more people next week. Like if this keeps growing, like I'll keep staying longer. But until then, be safe and I love you all. Till next week.